They say lightning never strikes twice, but history would beg to differ. From ships that sink twice to kings who share the same birthday, name and death, the universe seems to have a dark sense of humor. We like to think the world runs on logic equations, physics, probability. But every now and then, reality glitches and something happens that even the best scientists just shrug at. Today, we're diving into 10 real-life coincidences so eerie they blur the line between math and mystery. And no, these aren't just internet myths. Many are documented in archives, court cases, and historical records. So buckle up, because what you're about to hear may make you question whether the universe runs on probability or poetry. Let's start with one of the strangest prophecies in history, the unsinkable ship that sank twice. In 1898, a little-known author named Morgan Robertson wrote a novella called Futility. It told the story of a massive British ocean liner called the Titan. The ship was said to be the largest ever built, luxurious, unsinkable, until it struck an iceberg one cold April night and went down in the North Atlantic. Due to a shortage of lifeboats, more than half the passengers perished. Fast forward 14 years. It's 1912, and the RMS Titanic sets sail, the largest ship ever built, declared unsinkable by its creators. It too hits an iceberg on a freezing April night, and more than 1,500 lives are lost. The parallels are uncanny. Titan was 800 feet long, Titanic 882. Both had triple-screw propellers. Both carried about 3,000 people. Both sank 400 miles from Newfoundland. Robertson's fictional ship had 24 lifeboats. Titanic had 20. When the Titanic sank, Robertson's forgotten book suddenly resurfaced, and people accused him of being a clairvoyant. But the author dismissed it. He wasn't psychic, he said. He was a sailor who simply understood the trends. Shipbuilders were making massive luxury liners, and maritime laws hadn't updated since the 1850s. He didn't predict the future, he just saw the math. Still, the chilling accuracy of his story, the names, the cause. The timing remains one of the greatest coincidences in human history. It's as if fate itself was giving humanity a grim rehearsal. And if you think that's weird, wait till you hear about 2 US presidents whose lives and deaths seem copy-pasted from one another. Sometimes history doesn't just rhyme, it copy-pastes itself. The eerie parallels between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy are so specific they sound made up, yet they're all real. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy 1946. Lincoln became president in 1860. Kennedy in 1960, exactly 100 years apart. Both men fought for civil rights, both faced intense public opposition, and both brought a youthful spark to the presidency. Each was succeeded by a Southern Democrat named Johnson, Andrew Johnson, born in 1808, Lyndon B. Johnson, born in 1908. Again, a neat 100-year gap. But here's where things cross into glitch in the Matrix territory. Both were assassinated on a Friday, both were shot in the head, and both were sitting beside their wives. Lincoln was shot at Ford's Theatre. Kennedy was shot in a Lincoln car made by Ford. Lincoln's assassin, John Wilkes Booth, was born in 1839. Kennedy's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, in 1939, almost exactly a century later. Both assassins had 3 names each composed of 15 letters. Booth shot Lincoln in a theatre and fled to a warehouse. Oswald shot Kennedy from a warehouse and fled to a theatre. Even their secretaries got caught in this cosmic loop. Lincoln's secretary, Mrs. Kennedy, warned him not to go to the theatre that night. Kennedy's secretary, Mrs. Lincoln, told him not to travel to Dallas. Coincidence, maybe? But it's the kind of coincidence that makes mathematicians uncomfortable. Researchers from MIT once pointed out that given enough historical data, patterns are inevitable. But this pattern feels like a mirror, not random noise. Some historians suggest the Lincoln-Kennedy symmetry is a lesson in cycles, how societies repeat the same moral and political struggles century after century until they finally learn. Others, like physicist Michio Kaku, call it an example of statistical clustering, rare events that happen not because of destiny, but because our brains can't resist connecting the dots. Still, you can't help but wonder, was it chance? Or some unseen rhythm in history echoing every 100 years? And if you think 2 presidents sharing one fate is spooky, wait till you meet a king who found his exact double and died the same day he did. Now imagine this, you're the king of Italy, and one evening you sit down for dinner only to discover that the restaurant owner looks exactly like you. Not similar haircut or same smile, no, identical. That's exactly what happened to King Umberto in 1900. When he dined at a small restaurant in Monza, he met the owner who not only looked like his twin, but shared his name, birthday, and even hometown. Both were born in Turin on March 14, 1804. Both had married women named Margherita. And both had opened their careers, one as a monarch, one as a restaurateur, on the same day. At first, the king was amused, a divine prank, an odd quirk of fate. But the coincidences kept stacking. They had both served in the same regiment. Both had been married for the same number of years. It was as if fate had printed two copies of one man. The next day, the king planned to honor his doppelganger at a public event. But before he could, tragedy struck. The restaurant owner, the other Umberto, was shot dead in a sudden street dispute. Hours later, as the king expressed his shock at the news, an anarchist in the crowd assassinated King Umberto, shot through the heart. Both men died on the same day. Coincidence or cosmic choreography? Modern psychologists have a term for these moments, meaningful coincidences. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, events linked by meaning, not direct cause. Maybe it's our brains craving order in chaos. Or maybe, as some physicists suggest, reality occasionally folds over itself in statistically improbable ways. Either way, the king and his double remains one of the most poetic tragedies in royal history. Two men, bound by fate, meeting, mirroring, and dying as one. And speaking of eerie parallels between fiction and reality, what if a novelist wrote a tale of shipwreck, survival, and cannibalism, only for it to come true decades later with the same victim's name? Some coincidences are funny, some are tragic, but this one is downright haunting. In 1838, the legendary writer Edgar Allan Poe, master of the macabre, published his only full-length novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. It's a wild sea adventure filled with storms, shipwrecks, and despair. The story ends with four stranded sailors who, starving and delirious, draw lots to see who will be sacrificed. The unlucky victim, a young cabin boy named Richard Parker. Fast forward 46 years. In 1884, the English yacht Mignonette set sail from Southampton to Sydney. Midway, a storm wrecked the ship, leaving four survivors adrift on a lifeboat. Captain Tom Dudley, Edwin Stevens, Edmund Brooks, and a 17-year-old cabin boy, yes, named Richard Parker. After weeks without food or water, Parker drank seawater and fell ill. Near death, the captain made a terrible decision to kill and eat him so the others might live. They did, and just days later they were rescued. The case Regina v. Dudley and Stevens became a landmark in English law, ruling that necessity is no defense for murder. But beyond the courtroom, the world was shaken by the fact that Poe's fiction had played out in real life with the same name, same number of survivors, and same horrifying act. Statistically, the odds of such overlap are astronomically low, about 1 in tens of billions, according to later probability models from Cambridge. Yet it happened. Coincidence? Or was Poe a man obsessed with the uncanny, somehow tapping into a deeper current of human fate? Some researchers in literary psychology argue that stories like Poe's are psychic blueprints of the anxieties and dangers of their time, and reality in its own twisted way occasionally fulfills them. Whatever the truth, the tale of Richard Parker remains one of the most bone-chilling examples of life imitating art. A grim echo across time, whispering that imagination and destiny might share a darker connection than we care to admit. But now, let's look at a coincidence that's a little more cosmic one, that links an American legend to a comet that only visits Earth once every 75 years. Some people seem to arrive on Earth with celestial timing, and Mark Twain was one of them. Born November 30th, 1835, Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, entered the world just 2 weeks after the appearance of Halley's Comet. Halley's Comet, the most famous comet in history, is visible from Earth only once every 75 to 76 years. Throughout his life, Twain joked that he and the comet were cosmic twins. In 1909, he said, "I came in with Halley's Comet in 1835. It is coming again next year, and I expect to go out with it. It will be the greatest disappointment of my life if I don't." The universe apparently listened. Twain died of a heart attack on April 21st, 1910, the very day after Halley's Comet made its closest pass to Earth. It's the kind of poetic symmetry Twain himself would have laughed at, too perfect to be real, too eerie to ignore. Astrophysicists today might shrug and call it coincidence. But psychologists see something deeper. Humans are pattern-seeking machines. We crave meaning in chaos. When Twain connected his life to the comet, he created a story, and perhaps that narrative made its own truth. Statistically, the odds of someone being born and dying within a 2-day window of Halley's Comet appearances is about 1 in 300 million. It's rare enough to make even the most skeptical astronomer pause for a second. Mark Twain was a man of humor, irony, and cosmic wonder. So it feels fitting that his life and death would sync perfectly with one of the universe's most famous travelers. And while Twain's story is poetic, the next one feels almost supernatural. Two brothers born together lived apart for 70 years, only to die the same day, in the same way, on the same road. If someone told you lightning could strike twice in the same spot, you'd roll your eyes. But in Finland 2002, it wasn't lightning, it was fate. In the small town of Raahe, a 70-year-old man was cycling across a busy highway when tragedy struck. He was hit by a truck and killed instantly, a heartbreaking yet ordinary accident. But just 2 hours later, less than a mile away on that same road, another cyclist was struck by another truck. He too was killed. When police arrived and checked the records, they were stunned. The two men weren't just the same age, they were identical twins. They'd lived apart for decades, had no contact, and neither knew the other would be cycling that day. The investigating officer later said, "It made my hair stand on end. We could not find any rational explanation." Statistically, the odds of two identical twins dying in the same way on the same road within hours of each other are almost zero, lower even than being struck by lightning twice in one lifetime. Psychologists might call it twin telepathy, a debated phenomenon where twins seem to share a mysterious connection across distance. Some studies, like those from the University of London's Twin Research Unit, have found identical twins often experience synchronized changes in heart rate or mood. Some even report physical sensations when the other is hurt. Coincidence or connection, we may never know. But there's something hauntingly poetic about two lives beginning together and ending almost in the same heartbeat. And speaking of families bound by fate, our next story takes us deep into the Roman Empire's last royal bloodline, a dynasty haunted by one eerie number that followed them everywhere: 17. For centuries, the Romanov dynasty ruled Russia with opulent palaces, military might, and divine authority. But for the last of their line, Tsar Nicholas II and his family, one number seemed to shadow them like a cursed 17. It began with the year 1917, when the Russian Revolution erupted, ending more than 300 years of Romanov rule. Nicholas abdicated the throne in March, and by July 1918, the royal family was executed on the 17th day of the month. That alone might seem like grim coincidence. But as historians later noticed, the number 17 kept weaving through every key event of the dynasty's downfall. The revolution that overthrew them began on March 17th by the Julian calendar. Lenin's pivotal April theses, which set the stage for the Bolshevik takeover, were delivered in 1917. Even their execution site, the Ipatiev House, had 17 steps leading down to the basement where they met their fate. Coincidence? Numerologists didn't think so. They claimed that in ancient numerology, 17 symbolizes the end of a cycle transformation through destruction. Whether you believe in that or not, the parallels are undeniable. Every turning point in the Romanovs' fall was stamped with a 17. Modern historians, though, offer a less mystical view. As Harvard's Richard Pipes once noted, humans are pattern makers in a chaotic sea of history. The number 17 may not be cursed. It just happened to be the year destiny caught up with an empire already cracking from within. Still, for the superstitious, it's hard to ignore what Nicholas II once wrote in his diary weeks before the revolution. "I feel something closing in. Everything seems marked by the same number." A number that would indeed mark the end of a royal bloodline. But before we wrap up, there's one more story, perhaps the most poetic of them all. It's about a man who found a lost book by sheer chance, only to discover that fate had written his name in the margins years before. Some coincidences feel like fate winking at you. This one, it's practically fate writing a post-it note saying, "I planned this." In the early 1970s, actor Anthony Hopkins, long before his Hannibal Lecter fame, was cast in a film adaptation of The Girl from Petrovka. It was a novel by author George Pfeiffer. Determined to study the source material, Hopkins searched every bookstore in London for a copy. Nothing. Out of print. Not even the British Library had one. Frustrated, he headed home. But as he waited at Leicester Square station, he spotted a tattered book left on a bench. Curious, he picked it up and froze. It was The Girl from Petrovka. A once-in-a-lifetime coincidence, right? Except the universe wasn't done. 2 years later, during filming, Hopkins met Pfeiffer in person. They got to talking, and Pfeiffer mentioned that he'd lost his personal copy of the book in London years earlier. It had been filled with his handwritten notes, annotations, and edits. Hopkins retrieved the old copy he'd found and handed it to Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer opened it and nearly dropped it. It was his own copy. His handwriting was still there, the same underlines, same margin notes. Out of millions of people in London, one man who needed that exact book found the author's lost personal copy by chance. Scientists call such moments serendipitous convergence, when unrelated probability lines meet in impossibly precise ways. Statisticians say the odds are so tiny they border on 1 in a billion. Yet it happens. Maybe it's just probability at play. Or maybe, as Jung's synchronicity theory suggests, meaning has a way of guiding coincidences exactly where they need to go. But coincidences aren't always so charming. Sometimes they carry a tragic symmetry, like the story of a father and son who both gave their lives to the same monument exactly 13 years apart. The Hoover Dam is one of America's proudest engineering feats, a colossal wall of concrete taming the mighty Colorado River. But behind its grandeur lies a chilling story of symmetry and sacrifice. The dam's construction began in the early 1920s and claimed 96 official lives. From heat stroke to industrial mishaps, danger was part of the blueprint. Yet among all those deaths, two names stand out: a father and his son bound by an eerie fate. Their story begins on a cold December morning. On December 20th, 1922, surveyor J.G. Tierney drowned while searching for the perfect site to build the dam. He became the first recorded fatality of the project. 13 years later, when the Hoover Dam was nearly complete, tragedy struck again on December 20th, 1935. This time, it was Patrick Tierney, J.G.'s son, who fell from one of the dam's intake towers and died instantly. Both father and son lost their lives on the same date, 13 years apart, each marking the beginning and the end of a monumental human endeavor. Historians and engineers often retell this story as a testament to the human cost of progress. But to others, it feels like something deeper, as if the dam demanded a perfect circle of sacrifice, a symmetry closing the loop with eerie precision. Psychologists might call it retrospective patterning, our mind's way of connecting emotional dots after the fact. Yet even engineers on the site admitted it shook them. One wrote, "It's like the river took back what it gave." Modern writers see poetry in it: the first man to die for the dam's creation, the last for its completion. A father and son immortalized not in stone but in symmetry. And as strange as that sounds, there's one more coincidence that feels like the universe playing dice with human lives. A pair of brothers separated for decades who lived carbon copy lives without ever knowing it. The story of the Jim twins might be the closest thing science has to proving that destiny could be written in DNA. In 1940, twin boys were born in Ohio and separated soon after birth. Each was adopted by a different family, completely unaware the other existed. For 39 years, they lived apart, mirror images moving through different worlds. But here's where it gets impossibly strange. Both families, by sheer coincidence, decided to name their adopted sons James. One became James Springer, the other James Lewis. Each boy grew up believing he was unique. Yet when they met in 1979, their lives lined up like matching blueprints. Both Jims were 6 feet tall and weighed 180 pounds. Both had a childhood dog named Toy. Both were bad at spelling but great at math. Both worked as part-time sheriff's deputies. They smoked the same brand of cigarettes and drank the same beer. Both married women named Linda divorced them, then married women named Betty. Each had a son named James Allan, though one spelled it Allan. Even their favorite vacation spot was identical: the same beach in Florida. Scientists at the University of Minnesota studied them as part of a groundbreaking twin research project. The findings stunned psychologists around the world. While environment shapes us, the Jim twins suggested that genetics influence far more than we imagined. From habits and hobbies to partners and preferences. One researcher called it a mirror held up to nature. Another said, it's as if their choices were guided by an invisible internal script. It's easy to dismiss coincidences as random noise, but sometimes the pattern is too elegant, too consistent to ignore. Maybe the Jim twins didn't defy logic. Maybe they revealed it. And when you look at all these stories, from the Titanic to the twins, one question lingers. Are coincidences just math or messages? When you step back and look at them all, the Titanic and the Titan Lincoln and Kennedy the King and his double patterns begin to form. The universe, it seems, loves symmetry. These stories defy logic, stretch probability, and blur the line between chance and destiny. They remind us that sometimes truth feels stranger than fiction. A novelist predicts a shipwreck decades before it happens. Two presidents live mirrored lives a century apart. A father and son die building the same dam on the same date. Even a pair of twins separated at birth unknowingly live copy-paste lives. It's tempting to explain it all away, to call them coincidences, statistical clusters, random events. But deep down, we sense something more poetic at play. As astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson once said, "We are part of the universe. So when we find patterns, maybe it's the universe recognizing itself through us." Maybe that's what these stories really are, the cosmos winking back at its own reflection, reminding us that even in a world of equations and logic, there's still mystery, rhythm, and wonder. That science and synchronicity can share the same heartbeat. So the next time life hands you a strange coincidence, don't just brush it off. Pause. Smile. Maybe you're standing inside one of the universe's little jokes. Because sometimes meaning hides in repetition. And sometimes the universe just likes to rhyme. Which of these coincidences blew your mind the most? The prophetic novel, the presidential mirror, or the cosmic twin story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you love exploring how science, history, and fate collide in the strangest ways imaginable, hit that subscribe button and join the adventure. Because here, every week we uncover how weird and wonderful our universe truly is. And maybe, just maybe, we'll catch it winking back again.